Hey, what's up, everybody? We have Nicole Espinosa, the author of The Short Sale Uncensored, as well as owner of The Short Sale Queen. Just took her services nationwide, and she's growing, expanding quickly. She just came through our Shield Maiden Immersion program here just about a month ago, maybe. And time flies. I can't even really remember how long ago that was, but
Me neither. I was like, has it been a month? I don't
yeah, I
know.
don't know. I think it's been somewhere around there, but yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So I'd like to start off asking this question. What comes to mind for you when you think or when you hear the word or the phrase or the term championship leadership? Obviously, that's the name of the podcast. And so I always love to ask, like, what comes to mind for you when you hear championship leadership?
First thing that comes to my mind is probably like elite leaders in whatever industry, people at the top of their game that are running either companies or just killing it with whatever they're doing. So like top of the top, that's first thing that comes to my mind.
And are there any specific people that would come to mind for you when you think of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, and it just maybe not like a specific person, but I guess it
Okay.
would depend on the category.
Yeah. I didn't know if sometimes there's just a person or two that would come to your mind, maybe even in your industry, other than the short sale queen, of course. But yeah, who are some leaders inside of your space, your area of expertise?
Yeah, so we have incredible realtors and top companies or top teams in real estate that probably would come to mind would be, in the investor space, Max Maxwell, and, in the realtor space, Josh DeShong, like people that are running like these massive nationwide companies,
Yeah,
probably be the people that would come to mind for me.
awesome. Thank you. What tell us a little bit more about your story. Like, you haven't always been the short sale queen, and so yeah, what has kind of gotten you to where you are today? Like, what's the path been for you?
Yeah, so definitely have not always been the short sale queen. It was actually a nickname for a really long time, that it was one of those things that on social media, people would tag me and say, oh, just talk to the short sale queen. And
That's
so
awesome.
finally, I kind of just adapted and decided to brand that way. The company that were you saying that just went nationwide, we actually just launched in March. So it's very recent, very
Yeah.
new. And it's been an incredible journey. I mean, I got into the business 9 years ago, almost 10, and I kind of fell into real estate on accident. I moved to Texas from Florida and had no idea what I wanted to do. Was brand new here, really missing the beach. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to try to give Texas a shot. It's a totally different lifestyle here. And started working for a foreclosure brokerage. So working for the broker, and then it just kind of evolved. I mean, it was a horrible job, but I learned the ins and outs of working with the banks. And then when I got licensed and left, I kind of just fell into it. Like my first listing ended up being a short sale, and it was one of those unknowns that no one really understood. And I am a solution oriented person. Like I love challenges. I love figuring out, fixing problems. It's probably also my biggest weakness too.
Yeah.
Because not everything needs to be fixed. But yeah, so it was just one of those things where I started doing it. I developed my process, and honestly, what's gotten me here is just consistency. I meet people from, I'll run into people that I met 9 years ago, and they're like, "You're still doing this?" I'm like,
Yeah.
"Still here, still
So,
here."
yeah.
And that's a big deal for my industry, because with real estate agents specifically, and I know this is entrepreneurs in general, I know you have in every field, but with real
Yeah.
estate specifically, you have realtors that are jumping around, being generalists instead of specialists. And so no one really knows where they're at or what they're doing. And they have this bright and shiny idea, and then 30 days later, it's something different. And so I think that's really what sets me apart, is that I've been consistent. I'm really passionate about it, and I teach a lot, like I educate a lot for realtors and investors on the subject. So
Yeah, it's so true that you say that. I mean, there's the age old phrase, right? The riches are in the niches, and
yeah.
But it's really difficult for business owners, for entrepreneurs to really focus in on that niche and go all in on it and stay consistent with it, that long-term vision. Because, right, I mean, no matter what you do or what you choose, I think it really comes down to being consistent, being in it for the long term, really getting to become an expert in that area and to really master it before you even think about moving on. Because, you know, that might happen to you someday down the road, right? You expand a bit, but the fact that you have just stuck in that and stayed in that game is there's no surprise. I think you said you have 100 listings a month. Is that right?
Yeah, that's every month. So our goal before the end of the year is going to be 150 that we're managing a month. But yeah, and here's the deal. Like, I feel like I'm just figuring this out. Right. So, you know, everyone's like, wow, so impressed. I'm like, no, I feel like it's just happening. I just feel like this year I figured this out. Okay. So, but that's the thing, right? You keep moving forward, you fail forward. Yeah. And so it's, instead of being, you know, defeated and saying, okay, well, I failed. I mean, I probably could write, I know I wrote a book on short sales, but I could write a whole other book on what not to do.
Yeah.
Because I'm a salesperson by nature, and I'm stubborn, and I've got that I can figure it out attitude, which is why I also said it's my biggest weakness. Yeah. Because yes, it's a strength to be solution oriented, but it's also a weakness because when you think that way, you just think, okay, I can figure this out myself. And instead of humbling yourself and saying, hey, maybe I could go, you know, to people that have already done this and stop trying to reinvent the wheel. And so when I say that I feel like I'm just now figuring this out, it's because in the last year and a half is when I intentionally put myself in rooms with people that were doing 10 times as much as I have. Yeah. And it completely changes your perspective of what you're capable of, what, you know, really can happen. So, I mean, it's been a game changer for me. I mean, we've literally tripled our production in the last year and 365 days. Like a year ago today, I actually just wrote a post about it on the Facebook this morning because my office manager was like, do you remember where you were last year? And I'm like, no, you know, because you're just always moving. And she's like, yeah, you were a shit show last year. You, she's like, you know, you fired everybody. You started from scratch. And you did this, you did that. And I was like, yeah, no, I got to the point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I started from scratch. I fired everyone. I went into every single part of my business and I did it. I went to doctor. I had high blood pressure.
My goodness.
I'm too young for that. I'm like, no. Yeah. And so it was very, very humbling because, you know, really seeing, okay, I've got to figure this out. And I gave myself this timeline where I was like, okay, I'm all in. And if I can't figure this out, I'm done. And so that's what it was. It was putting myself in rooms with people that were 10 times smarter than me, that were doing a lot more and already had the systems in place, and just being a sponge and really taking that on. And most importantly, taking action, because, you know, you can learn all you want. If you don't take action, you're just a really good student.
Exactly. Yeah. So well, how big is your team? So you blew it up and you fired everybody. And now I know you have a good sized team now, right? So yeah. How big?
Well, so my first hire was my office manager, and that was the most incredible because she's like my right-hand person now. So in office, I have 7 employees. Well, I have 4 in office and 3 VAs, which are virtual assistants.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I have 2 offices. So I have an office here in Dallas, Fort Worth, and then I have an office in Houston. In Houston, we have 3 agents, and here we have 2.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Wow, that's incredible. And so that's a huge volume for 7 people, right?
Yeah. Well, everybody has their role. And I think the biggest thing for me is that I learned to stay in my lane, because the other reason why I burned out so quickly was because even though I had bodies in the position, I was still like, hey, did you do this? Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, can you tell me about this? And so I wasn't letting go because I wasn't empowering them. You know, they didn't have the capacity to do the job because I wasn't hiring correctly. I was hiring out of loyalty instead of skill set. We could do a whole other podcast on that. Right. And so so then it was like, okay, I was very, very strategic on who my hires were. But yeah, I mean, our team, I mean, it's everything. So they're doing fantastic.
Well, let's talk about that. Before we started, right? We were talking about Shield Maiden and
Mm-hmm.
the fact that that forced you to let go and empower your team because you had to, because you were with us for a week and really we didn't
I
give you any
mean,
time or energy to do anything else, by design, of course. But yeah. So talk to us about how maybe that has helped you. You know, you talked about less anxiety, less stress, because now you came back and you're like, oh, hang on a second,
right.
like, hey, they're doing fine without me. You're almost like, what? There should be a bunch of fires going here. I'm not as important as I thought I was. What's going on?
Yeah, I had to get over myself, honestly.
Yeah,
And it wasn't on purpose. It wasn't that
of
I
course.
was like, oh, I'm the only person that can do this. It's just that I had been the only person that was doing it for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just used to, I had trained myself to be in the office at 8 a.m., work myself to death. And then if anything, I felt guilty if I wasn't working at night. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? And even though I was dying to get out of that survivor mode, I couldn't because I was so scared that the minute I let up, that everything was going to come crashing down. And so when I went to Shield Maiden, you guys, that's a whole other story, but
it's
I
another.
didn't have
We
my
got a lot of
phone.
podcasts to record.
We do. But we, like you said, by design, you forced us to completely disconnect. I mean, it was so freeing, honestly. I remember when we did the walk-in talks after the sessions, and I was like, I have no control. And this is the best feeling ever
Yeah.
because I was being told what to do. I could not, I mean, I didn't have to think, right?
Yeah.
If anything, I got depressed when I came back. I'm like, Nate, tell me what to do. I don't want to have to think anymore. But yeah, so when I got back, I realized like I said, it wasn't that important. The team felt like, wow, like they made their own decisions. They felt empowered to do their job. They killed it. I
That's
mean,
awesome.
and now they're doing, and I'm not even doing anything now when it comes to them. I mean, of course I'm overseeing it, but
Yeah.
I don't have to question them and they don't feel like I'm, running behind them after they're doing a task or something like that. So I always thought that the world would end if I, unplugged for 4 or 5 days, but
Yeah.
it was just the most freeing thing because I don't have that anxiety anymore. Like
Yeah.
I wake up in the morning, it's not the end of the world if I don't go to the office exactly at 8 a.m. You get into this business to be your own boss and you become like a slave to it because it's your baby and you're working so hard on it. And so that for me, I mean, I got so much out of Shield Maiden and I'm so grateful for the experience. But if I didn't get anything else but that, it would have been worth it to
Yeah.
really step out of my environment for
Yeah.
sure.
And like you said, you become a slave to it, which is exactly the opposite reason of why people create a business, right? I mean,
100%.
that's so that you can be your own boss and so that you can have time and flexibility and not be a slave to somebody else's business.
Right.
And also there's a lot of guilt there, right? Because now you're
Yep.
like, well, I'm the owner. Like if I'm not working 24/7, what is everyone else going to think? And now again,
Right.
you're kind of, again, going back to that feeling like you're a slave to your business. But so it's, you invested significantly in yourself to do that, to take the time away. And so you were willing to do that. I think there's a lot of other entrepreneurs, business owners that just aren't, I don't know, that it's really hard for them to make that step to take the time away because they're so afraid of what is going to happen. But it's almost like if every business owner out there that has a team in place and you're positioned properly, right? I mean, you've
Right.
definitely had some things in place to be able to do that. And not
Of course.
everybody
Yeah.
does, but at the same time, like there's a lot to be said to take that time away to just let your team grow and see what happens, and then you can always adjust from there. Because the big picture is it was only a week, right? Like what can
Oh,
really
yeah.
go wrong?
And barely a week. So it
Yeah,
wasn't even like it was a full 7 days. But I will tell you this, Shield made me a better leader because I mean, one, we can't give out what we don't have, right? So if we're stressed, if we're overworked, if we're tired, like we're going to project that, even not intentionally, but we just are. My favorite analogy is when they say that, when you go on an airplane and they're like, you have to put your own mask on first before you can help someone else, right?
Yeah.
So you need the oxygen first in order to help people. And so I know how important it is, but it's not until you actually do it. Like, we could sit here and talk about self-development all day, but it's not until you put yourself in an environment where you have this realization and this aha moment, like, oh my God, now I get it. And so when I came back, I had such a fresh perspective. I'm handling situations differently, confrontations. And I always felt like I was a good communicator. Like, I feel like I'm a good communicator, but
Yeah.
even there's just certain things that I just tweaked after going to Shield Maiden and really going through how to really handle situations and changing your perspective and going through all that now I'm implementing, and I find myself repeating, and I'm like, oh, this is awesome, because I see the changes. So it's awesome.
That's incredible. So, of course, championship level leaders, the best of the best, definitely empowering leaders for sure. What are some of the biggest characteristics to you that are most important to you as whether in yourself or as you are bringing up other leaders inside of your team? Like, what are some of the championship leadership characteristics that are most important to you as you're out looking to build your team in nationwide?
So for me, I think to be a great leader, I think your culture that you develop is everything. I think people underestimate how important culture is in the environment, because people will take less money. Not that you should pay them, but less money. But people will take less money or go somewhere else for less money. They will, work so much harder for somewhere they want to be, and they as a leader, they have to agree with your vision, right? They have to be in line with that. It doesn't matter if they're an admin, it doesn't matter if they're an agent, it doesn't matter if they're your partner or whatever. And I think a lot of people, they get caught up in the BS of, wow, look at my success or whatever, that they forget everything that's gotten them there, which is why the people that go up really high really fast also crash really fast, because they don't value the people that are around them that have really built them. Like, I'm great, I know what I'm doing or whatever, but I'm nothing without my team.
Yeah.
And I value them so much. Like, I am constantly appreciating them. I want them to know how much I appreciate them. I'm very vocal about that. The way I pay them, the way I treat them, everything. And I've just seen people that have, especially in my industry, that get so big that, whether it's going nationwide, whether it's multiple markets or whatever, that lose and have such a revolving door that there's no stability.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, if you want to be a good leader, you have to be right in the trenches with them. I mean, they're not going to follow a dictator. They're not going to follow someone that's just like, you got to do this, this, and this. Like, they know that at the end of the day, when shit hits the fan, like, I'm right there with them. And for me, that's probably the most important thing in creating a foundation for your company. As a leader, even if you're an employee, but you're in a management role or in a leadership position, because if people are following your vision, if people love where they are and they feel appreciated, they will work 10 times harder, and you don't have to ask. You don't have to say, hey, can you stay late? They're going to tell you, no, I'm staying because we got to get this done. We're all in this together.
Yeah.
So for me, I think the culture and who you are as a person, I think at the end of the day, that will determine your success every single day. Because I've seen even people that on Facebook and on paper, they're successful, and you can't even, you don't even know who their employees are. You don't even know who their staff is, because it's just this constant thing. And yeah, so that's for me is probably the most important, your foundation. And I know that because I had to rebuild it.
Yeah, right.
So,
yeah, absolutely.
So
Not that long ago.
it's very important.
Yeah, that's incredible wisdom. And like you said, you are still very young, and so that's an incredible place to be. Like, I think when I was a officer, a first lieutenant, platoon leader in Kuwait, and that's always been my thing too, right? Just, I want to be there. I want to be seen. I want to be present. I want to empower my team and let them do their job, and not make it feel like they're just being overwatched for the mistakes that they might make. But I want to be there. I want to get to know my people, and I want to let them know that I'm not just sitting in an office, air conditioned, watching Netflix, like while they're out on the line doing their job, right? Like, so
Yeah.
I would always spend time with them and really get to know them and just support them as much as possible. Still be the leader, still have that
Yeah, there's still that
line.
level of respect.
Yeah,
There's still that
absolutely.
line for sure. But yeah, I totally agree. That's awesome.
So, but where did that come from for you? Is it something that's just been kind of natural? Has that been something that you've learned from? Or there been some people that have come along the way that have guided you to where you
I
are
think it
today?
I think it came from being an employee. I mean, I had the worst bosses. I mean, when I started out in the industry, I mean, she was, I don't know if you can say this, but she was batshit crazy. Like
You can say it,
she okay, I'm just joking.
yeah.
But like I had to run her office. I mean, I quit like 4 times, and every time I quit, she'd give me a raise. And I'm like, that's not why I'm not
Yeah.
trying to get more money out of you. Like, I don't want to work for you. I mean, she'd lock herself in the office and you deal with it, Nicole, and whatever. And
You would
so
lock yourself in the office?
she would lock herself in the
Really?
office because she just didn't want to talk to people. She didn't want to deal with it. And she owned the company or whatever. And, being in all these environments as an employee really young, like I knew what it felt like to work really hard for someone else and not feel appreciated, have a toxic environment. And really, like, life's too short for that. I mean, it really is. I mean, when you're working, that's the majority of your day. Like, you have family, you have friends, but your work consumes so much of your life. And, even with my employees, I told them, like, if you're not happy, like, I want to keep the lines of communication open, because at the end of the day, I don't want you to be here if you're not happy, because
Right.
life's too short. Life's too
Yeah.
short. Like, do something that you love. Like, don't, just collect a paycheck, no matter what kind of job that you have or business, because if you do it for the money, you're going to get burned out. It's not going to make sense. Money will never be a motivating factor for success. It just won't. Now, it can be your why, in the sense that you're building the life that you want. Yes, it's a component, but it's never the reason why you should make decisions or a job or a company or things like that. So I think for me, the reason why I am who I am as a leader is because I had terrible bosses, and I knew exactly how it felt to go through the interviews, to go through, try to work really hard and, get acknowledged and all of that. So I think that's where it came from.
Yeah, that's great. What let's shift gears here from that to, there's always a moment in our life, and there's probably multiple moments, but is there one for you that really sticks out where I talk about it as like the fork in the road, right? A championship leader, they're willing to do and go the path that most aren't, right? They have this vision, they can see things differently than others, right? They have this,
Yeah.
this crazy perspective that many others just can't even imagine it for themselves. And so, and then they're willing to like execute on it. They're willing to follow it. And like I would say, go right when everybody else is going left, when maybe the safe route, or, the route that it's like the slow drip to regret, right? Because they're going to look
Right.
back later on after, because they don't realize it at the time that, man, they should have went right. So is there a major turning point in your life where, had you gone left, and it might've been the easy path at the time to do that, wouldn't have you sitting here today, wouldn't have you going nationwide, wouldn't have you as a short sale queen? Can you think of a moment?
So, yeah, I mean, I think of two. I mean, when I first started, so I, had a salary. I was young. And so at the time I was making like 50 grand, and I think I was like 24, 23, right? So when you're in your young 20s, I mean, that's a lot of money. So
Yeah.
I was running an office. I was making 50 grand. I had benefits. I was pregnant, and I didn't agree with, I had partnered up with someone, and this was when I first started doing short sales. I didn't agree with who he was as a person, what he was trying to do, whatever. And so I left, and I was 6 months pregnant, and I was married at the time, but my husband, who I'm divorced now, thank God, but he was just non-contributing, non-everything. But,
Yeah.
and I remember at that moment, I was so convicted. I was like, I know that I can do this. I know that, I had this, like you said, this vision. That was the perfect way of putting it. Like, from day one, I've always had the vision of what I wanted. I knew what I wanted. I just didn't know how to get there.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I said this from day one. I was like, I'm building an empire. I'm building an empire. Like I see this way. I see this way. And I knew that there was so much opportunity because agents are lazy. They, they can barely do the bare minimum with the regular transactions, nevertheless the most complicated ones.
Right.
I was passionate about it. So I left, and I remember having a conversation with my family, and they were like, no, like, write it out, collect the money,
Yeah.
do this, that, whatever.
Yeah.
That's the dumbest thing you can do. And like, no one understood. I was like, no, I know I can do this. And it was one of those things where it was like, okay, I could stay where I'm at because I'm comfortable. I'm making good money, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
we have our perspective at the time. I'm making good money because
Yeah.
I was not only making a salary, I was also making my commissions.
And you were 6 months
So,
pregnant.
and I was 6 months pregnant. So it's like,
Yeah.
are you insane? You're the one that makes the money. You're the one that makes the money for your family because my husband at the time wasn't.
Yeah.
And I already had a son because I was pregnant with my daughter. So it was like, but I was like, no, this is what I'm doing. So I left. I had like $10,000 in my account, and I was like, I just started. And it was, then I went through a lawsuit. I got sued because
Wow.
I was competition. I spent 5 months fighting this company because they didn't have a leg to stand on, but their thought process was, this is a young kid, she doesn't have any money, and she's just
Yeah.
going to quit
Yeah.
and not compete with us.
Yeah.
And I mean, at that moment, it was like, okay, I could just do regular real estate. I could just do this, or I could keep fighting because I know what I'm fighting for.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, that was the most emotional, longest 5 months ever. And I basically told them to stick it where the sun don't shine. And we went to court, and they ended up just settling and dropping it.
I love it.
Because they knew that we went to court, because I, countersued. But I was like, when they knew they went to court, they wouldn't win.
They obviously
But
don't know that you don't mess with the short sale queen.
well, they knew who I was as a person, that was stubborn and
Yeah.
maybe naive.
Yeah.
But they also knew that if I actually had the time to develop this, that I'd, blow them out of the water. Because they weren't willing to do the work. It was me. I was the one that was doing it. So ultimately, the best day of my life was when it settled, the lawsuit settled, but I still had all these attorney fees. I mean, you imagine my business alone, when you do real estate, you're months out from getting money, right? This isn't like you're selling something like a tangible product. Like this is, selling houses where you're months out. Well, even more so with the short sales, because you can't predict closing dates or whatever. So not only was I stacked with attorney bills, but I also was just trying to make income. So for that moment, it was like, everyone around me is like, just Nicole, like, I get it, but just whatever. And I'm like, no. So that was probably the biggest moment for me.
That's huge.
And I'm so
good for
grateful
you.
that
Yeah. I mean, from the outside looking
happened.
in too, it's, I mean, I'm sure they had your best interests in mind too, right? It's not like they didn't,
Of course.
they're kind of like, oh, like, can't, 2 + 2 = 4. Hey, you got this good
Right.
money, you're pregnant. Like, what are you doing?
Right.
But that's championship leadership right there for sure. It's just like, no, you're very clear on what you wanted, and you were willing to do whatever needed to happen to get that and to put that work in the front end. So I love it. Thank you. Last thing that I want to ask is, is there one or two things that you could share with the audience here? Again, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, business owners, striving to become better leaders, championship level leaders, listen to this show. And so is there one or two things that you can leave with them that would really help them on that path that maybe you've learned along the way?
Absolutely. So what you just said of how, we go a different road, right? Don't be intimidated by it. Ultimately, you guys talk about this in Shield Maiden, that what do you want? Why does it matter?
Yeah.
And a lot of times people think that they want something because it looks cool or flashy, or, it's something that they think would be awesome to do, but they're not passionate, and it's not what they really want. So if you're going to kill yourself in being an entrepreneur and working your butt off, because don't make a mistake about it, it's 10, 20 times harder to be an entrepreneur than it is to work for someone else.
Yeah.
And we work harder than any boss would ever, make us work or whatever. But just understand that if you really truly know what you want, It's not going to matter if it sucks. It's not going to matter if you're tired. It's not like, you're not even going to see that. You're going to be so passionate, and you're going to see that big vision, and that's all you're going to work towards. It doesn't matter your circumstance. It doesn't matter if you're broke. It doesn't matter if you have to figure it out, because you will. Because if it's so important, you'll figure out a way to do it. If not, you'll just figure out a million reasons why you can't do it. So if this is something that you really want, go all in. This is all we have, right? This is the only life that we have. So if this is what you want to do, go for it, because it's okay to fail. Don't be intimidated by it, embrace it. And I think the biggest thing I can leave is learn from other people. Don't try and reinvent the wheel. That was my biggest mistake, because again, stubborn entrepreneur, stubborn salesperson. And, I'm so grateful that I have the people around me that I do, because it's just a matter of, having a mentor, having a coach in whatever field. It's so important, because it not only changes your perspective, but I literally can go to them and say, hey, what system did you use for this? Hey, what did you do with this? And those things will save me so much time and money and energy, because I have those people that I can connect with. So having a group of people that are, so much, are on a different level than you, that's so important. Don't hang around people that are just trying to make it too, which it's fine. You guys can encourage each other, but that shouldn't be your circle. Your circle should constantly be learning. Yes, I'm nationwide. Yes, all the stuff that you said, but I'm still learning. Like now I just have a whole other set of freaking problems and systems that I have to put into place. And if you're comfortable, and if you are, taking a step back or taking your foot off the gas because you feel like, oh, I've arrived or whatever, that's when you fail, because we're only as good as the things we constantly keep doing. So that would probably be my biggest advice, because that's something that I learned the hard way.
Yeah, thank you. That's beautiful. I love it. And what are a few ways that the listeners can follow you, get a hold of you? I know you have a program that you just put out as well. So yeah, just let us know about some of that, and we'll share that as well in the show notes, of course.
Yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram, the Nicole Espinosa, and Facebook, Nicole Espinosa. My website is vssqueen.com. And the program that I have is for real estate investors and real estate agents that are wanting to learn about short sales. It's a video course that walks you through the entire process, also helps you overcome objections. We do role playing, so you see how I talk to these homeowners, because these are homeowners that are completely different headspace. They're checked out. They don't want you, they need you. And so a lot of it is changing their perspective of why you add value to them to get the business. So that's on the website as well.
All right. Thank you. And thank you so much for taking time to be with us today. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Anything for you, Nate. Absolutely.
Thanks. Welcome to the Championship Leadership Podcast. This is Nate Bailey, leader of the show, and I'm excited today. We have Nicole Espinosa. She's become a good friend over a short time here. Recently came through our Shield Maiden immersion program, and she's an incredible woman. She's got an incredible story, and she's building an incredible empire. She is AKA the short sale queen. And with that, introduce you to Nicole Espinosa.